future is here. You now have the power to unlock the secrets of the hobby. An innovation that will change the way the industry works. The game changer is here. Card Ladder.
Hey everyone, this is Josh back with Cardboard Chronicles. Today I'm joined by Corey. How's it going, man?
Good. How you doing, Josh?
Pretty good. So today we got some new topics. We're going to talk about kind of the downturn in the market and ways to protect yourself against that, where we see the market going. Corey's got a lot of knowledge on this, and he's been through some of the cryptocurrency markets, so we're going to talk about some of the similarities there. Corey, why don't you start us off? Tell us about yourself and your background in the hobby.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess I have a similar story to most people. I've been playing sports my whole life and collecting as a kid. I think about 2 years ago, I jumped back into the hobby and I just started kind of obsessing over it, buying everything and anything. So fast forward maybe 6 months or so, had learned a lot of stuff and kind of realized like, here I have all this stuff, right? Like I just had tons of random cards and I didn't really like any of it. I just kind of had a lot, it was like junk, frankly, right? So I had some good stuff, I had some bad stuff, I had a good variety, but what I really started to learn is what kind of stuff I wanted to collect, right? And so I actually just sent like every single thing I had out to the consignment and just sold it all. I took a loss, didn't care, I just wanted to reset and start all over. And what I had decided was that I really wanted to focus on having bigger cards because I wanted less stuff again, and I wanted to have stuff that I really, really loved, and also that I thought was going to retain its value, right? So I'm definitely, I would say, kind of a hybrid of investor / collector, but I really just, who wants to lose money, right? So if you're buying a lot of this stuff for high dollar amounts, you want to make sure it retains its value, right? So that's kind of how I started to think about it, and so I started to buy stuff like mostly football, because at the time, this is probably about 1.5 years ago, and at the time, if you look at the gap between football and basketball, is massive. And also football is pretty much my favorite sport. So I'd say basketball is number 2. And so I liked a lot of the Jordan, LeBron, that was the kind of stuff that really got me back into the hobby. That was my plan, was to just buy a bunch of Jordan and LeBron, but then I started to look at the prices and I was just like, this is crazy. Like I can't afford this stuff, So I started to buy. The funny thing though, is I probably could have afforded the stuff because I ended up spending so much money on all the other cards. I could have just bought less, right? And so I ended up with a lot of like Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady and stuff like that. And now fast forward like about another year and it's just kind of the same thing. I continue to evolve. I kind of created this big spreadsheet of all the cards that I wanted to buy, calculated the kind of, amount it would take to buy them. I think it was like about $1 million. And now it's probably like $5 million. So I quickly realized, okay, that's not going to work either. Like this approach to collecting, this idea of like, okay, I've got, my top players. Essentially what I was looking at is basically building a collection of all the all-time greats. Mostly in basketball and football, but I was also interested in like Tiger Woods, definitely some soccer, Messi, Ronaldo, that kind of stuff. I wanted to get their cards, which again, at the time, their best cards were like 15, 20,000. Now which I thought was a fortune. Now I think they're actually in auction right now for like 60,000 already. And there's like 9 days left or whatever. So I kind of quickly realized I wasn't going to be able to just go down a list and, build a collection that way. It wasn't going to happen. So I was also realizing how hard it was to find a lot of these cards, right? So what was happening was I would start to go through the list and I would start to buy stuff. And I ended up basically with just the crappier stuff once again, right? The stuff that was easier to get, like the Barry Sanders score rookie card. I love Barry Sanders, but you can buy 10 of those on any given day, right? So once again, I was left with this pile of cards that I didn't care that much about. So now here we are today, and I have kind of a new kind of thinking about how to collect and my approach to it. So, which I can get into a little bit.
Yeah, I think the reason I wanted to bring you on is your story is very relevant to like what we're going through right now. Like maybe what you were hitting when you first started, it was like, yeah, you got in, you got a bunch of stuff because that's like what you're supposed to get, right? And then you just sort of get bored of it, or the price goes down or whatever. Like right now it's going down on some of that more common stuff. And then you sort of had to like force yourself to evolve. What kind of stuff were you buying at the beginning that you didn't like and that sort of made you want to look at?
Yeah, what's really crazy is I was pretty much from day one against a lot of the stuff that was popular and cool. Didn't make a lot of sense to me, but I even got sucked into it. Before you know, here I am buying that stuff, and I am definitely attracted somewhat to the flipping. I've done some of that. I'm kind of over it now, but that kind of stuff is just fun, like as a side thing to do. And so I definitely have fawned to that a little bit. But in the beginning, what I was buying was just, I didn't know what I was doing. So I was buying a lot of all kinds of different stuff. And I was not sure really even where I wanted to be in the hobby, right? So just learning the ins and outs of, you know how it goes, like all the little ins and outs of everything from grading to, actually like grading myself. Do I want to buy PSA? Do I want to buy BGS? So, all of that. So I was kind of just experimenting with everything. And I had a lot of just random stuff. And it wasn't so much that it was bad stuff as much as it was just, again, very random. And I didn't feel like I had a lot of focus, and I didn't feel like I had a lot of intent behind what I was buying. And so I just had a lot of stuff, right? So I think I actually was buying a lot of good stuff, but I also started to maybe overthink a little bit. I'm like, okay, someday I want to be able to sell stuff. I don't have an eBay account.
Yeah.
So I have to buy stuff now. So then I start buying stuff just to sell on eBay, basically, right? And so it's like a scattered kind of approach, and having just a lot of things and wanting to get more focused and wanting to have more intent behind my collection and investing.
So I'm calling this sort of like the S curve of the hobby, where like you buy a lot of stuff, you get excited, you jump in, and then you sort of hit this plateau of like, like you said, you got maybe bored of it or it was too random. How did you get to that next rise up into your collecting? Like, was there something that motivated you to keep going, or was it that you just kept seeing potential in it and you just wanted to shift, or like what kind of got you past that first wave?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think I have a very obsessive personality. So when I get into something, I really get into it. And if I'm not, I'm not. And so I've been pretty obsessed with it for the last year. And I probably took a few month break in between. And that's kind of where I hit that reset button and I started to buy. Again, I had some specific stuff I wanted to buy. Like I was trying to buy only PSA 10, only over, I tried to set these rules for myself, which now I'm getting away from a little bit as I evolve. But at the time, it was really good for me. And that's kind of the way I reset, because then it's just, okay, set the eBay save searches. I only want to focus on this, and this. When that stuff comes up, I'm getting it. And that's how I ended up with a good amount of the stuff that I have today. And once I kind of really got back into it, it was, and then flipping some stuff that really, kind of gave me some new energy. I played around with that a little bit, mostly just to see what it felt like. I recently I bought like a bunch of boxes and opened them and sent them all in to get graded. I'd never done that before. I was always kind of anti raw cards because I like to know what I'm going to get. Although that's a whole nother thing I'm learning. I've been learning that just because it's a PSA 10 doesn't mean it's the PSA 10, right? So that's something I didn't pay much attention to in the earlier days.
So I do like that you sort of honed in and focused on something and used that as your way to learn all the ins and outs, and then from there you can kind of evolve. So I think that's pretty good advice. So why don't you jump into what you do collect, maybe give people some taste and show what you got, some stories if you have any.
Yeah, sure. I do, for sure. So the way that I'm kind of thinking about collecting now that feels really good to me is I want to have cards that would be very, very painful to sell, right? And that's it. I don't want to have anything else. And so I actually only have 3 cards right now that I would say I truly would not sell. And everything else probably has a price, if I'm being honest. And so I'll start with those and then get into some of my like, okay, this would be tougher to sell. This would be tougher to sell, and kind of explain why. So I'll start with this one because this is one of my favorites. It's a Drew Brees. So the Contenders is kind of the more popular, mainstream, like the best card. I like this one a lot more. I don't know exactly how many there are. I think there's only 3 or 4 of them in a PSA 10, but there's only 100 of them. They're numbered to 1,000, but the first 100 are autographed, which is really cool. I don't know if you can really see that, but I love this card. This is definitely one of my favorite cards. And at the time that I bought this too, I was in that kind of mode of, like I said, kind of going down the list. And really what I wanted was for each one of my players to have the very best 1 or 2 cards. And this is one that was kind of on my radar, but I didn't think I'd never get it because it was that rare. And I'm like, I'm never going to be able to get that. So it wasn't even on my list. And that's exactly the kind of stuff I want to own, right? Now, I might not be able to get that stuff just by making a list, but when it comes up, now I don't really hesitate to buy this kind of stuff because it just never does come up. You know, you couldn't just go out and buy this right now. And that's what I like about that, and also the other stuff that I'll show you. So this Harden here, this is one that people would say is more mainstream and more popular, but there's not a lot of these. I think there's only like, you know, under 10 between PSA 10 and BGS 10. I think there's 1 or 2 BGS 10s. So to get, you know, the patch is like okay, but I think it's nice. I like the card a lot. This is another one. Again, if you wanted to go buy this right now, you couldn't just go on eBay and buy it, you know. So, and then finally, my all-time favorite, and this is one that, like, if I have one card that I'll never sell, like if I sell everything else and just don't even want to be in the hobby anymore, I can't sell this card. And this is the Iverson credentials. So
what's the pop on that? Like super low, right? Those are impossible
like
to grade.
3, yeah, it's super, super low. And what this is the same story as the Brees, right? So Iverson's like my all-time favorite, like, athlete growing up. And with this one, I was trying to get the refractor, Topps Chrome refractor, and I had multiple chances to get it, but I kept missing it. You know, it was worth like $3,000 when I was trying to get it. And when this one came up, I was like, okay, forget the refractor. I don't need that. This card's like way better, in my opinion anyway, and way more rare too. And so when it came up, it was an auction, PWCC auction, and I was gonna get it. Didn't matter what it took. And I actually got it a lot cheaper than I thought I was gonna have to pay. So I was super happy with that. Love that card. So those are the kinds of cards I want to be owning, right? Like, love these cards. Then I have some that are a little bit more like here's another Drew Brees. This card's awesome. It's rare. I love this card too. You know, but I don't need to have it. And then I've got like an Aaron Rodgers gold, Topps Chrome gold, super rare. There's only a couple of these. This is an awesome card. I probably will never sell this, but again, you know, for Aaron Rodgers, he's got a really sweet like SP Authentic RPA, and I would like to have that. That's my goal. I actually have a lot of Aaron Rodgers cards, and I've been selling them like since last week because he had such a great game. People are finally paying attention because my whole goal is to consolidate and get rid of some of this stuff, right? Like, here's another one. So these are awesome cards. This is a out of 25 SP Authentic Gold, which I just really like SP Authentic. And this card's really cool. I actually have 2 of these, but I'm going to sell them because I'd be much happier just having that one really nice RPA. And then I have stuff like this, and this will cross over into like what you're kind of focused on right now, right? I've got the Michael Thomas, and this one is like, I don't need to sell that. I got it for a good price, and there's just no reason to sell it. I like that, so it kind of fits into my category. And I got these 2 that I really like. So this is kind of my era of collecting. The 98, 99, 2000, that kind of range is where I was kind of as a kid. So Randy Moss, Charles Woodson, Peyton Manning, those are all, you know, my kind of childhood heroes. And then the last one I'll show you, because this is kind of an example of stuff that I was buying that I'm becoming a lot less interested in. It's a cool card, and it's more of like, I guess, the vintage category. Lawrence Taylor. It's cool. It's kind of rare relatively, but I see these go up in auction like every week, right? So even something like the Jordan 86 Fleer, it's an awesome card, but anything that I can just buy on demand any given week is less interesting to me, so regardless of what everyone else thinks about it. So that's kind of how I've evolved to have, I used to have a lot of this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And not necessarily vintage, but, in general, the kind of stuff that is cool and like valuable, but like you can buy it any day of the week. Now I'm trying to get just this stuff.
Yeah.
And what's kind of ironic about it is this stuff just distracts you from getting this stuff, right? So it kind of comes full circle.
Yeah. We have very similar tastes, dude. Like I really like the way you're going about it. And I kind of like that you're shifting away from, like, in some cases at least, you're shifting away from like the very obvious main rookie card and focusing more on like, okay, what's like a big serial printed rare rookie card that maybe not everyone knows about, but enough know about it where it's still iconic. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
the credentials is serial numbered versus the refractor, which isn't, and like the Brees versus the Brees Contenders, which is not serial numbered. The one you have is serial numbered. So like, what do you think about that? Kind of like shifting just a little bit off the main track.
Yeah, it's kind of, to me, it just makes sense because, well, there's that, but then there's also the fact that I just think they're better, like cooler cards, right? But yeah, what I've noticed is, so it works both ways. I think with the really rare stuff, you're not seeing. It's hard to be sitting there with that stuff and then watching like, these other cards just go insane in value, right? But if you're really collecting, like, who cares? Because your rare cards are definitely going to hold their value. And I kind of think it's going to work the opposite way too. Like the rare cards are going to be the last to ever go down in a crash. They may never go down in a crash, right? Because you really think about how infrequently these cards are selling and trading. I mean, you don't see them. You don't see them ever, right? So you still haven't seen this because I bought this one privately, right? So a lot of the super rare cards, and so it's kind of the short-term downfall of them, because since you're not seeing, everybody obsesses over the comps, right? Everybody wants to see those comps. Nobody feels comfortable buying something that they don't really understand the value of it, is for sure what I'm noticing. I try to take advantage of that, right? So when I bought this Brees, I paid probably way more than anyone else would have paid for it, but I wasn't comping it compared to like this card, because you couldn't. So I'm looking at the contenders, and I'm looking at the, crossing over into other players. You got to think a little bit outside of the box when you're valuing these cards. But I do definitely totally believe that when you look at this over time, like these are going to win. The other ones probably do fine too. Like a contenders, I'm sure will always do okay, but I mean, this card's just way better. So,
yeah. And if you ever sent that kind of stuff to like PWCC auction or something, it would do well, because there's got to be at least like 10, 15 guys that had never seen that thing and they need it for their collection. And they're just going to battle.
Exactly.
And they're not going to have comps, so they're going to make up numbers. I actually like what you said about, you said taking advantage of the fact that there are no comps. That's kind of an interesting point, because if you're into this long enough and you kind of know, you can kind of like generally figure out what things are worth if you know what you're doing and you know the market, you know the player and the set and all those types of things and the grade. So it's kind of interesting to know that like you feel like I'm definitely paying the highest all-time high for this card, and let's just say you think it's worth like $8,000, but you're pretty sure that you think it's actually like you'll buy it for 8, but you're pretty sure it's worth like 12 or something, right? I think there's a lot of room there versus like I gotta buy this and I gotta just hope it goes up, right?
Exactly. And that's also the kind of, I guess if you want to call it flipping or investing, that I'm also very interested in, because I have seen this come along every once in a while. So it's one thing to go buy like a whole bunch of, you just decide you really like this, I don't know, whatever hot player, Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or whatever, and you go stock up on their cards and cross your fingers, right? But then it's a whole nother game to do what you just described, which I've come across those opportunities a lot less, but it does happen where a card that's rare, it pops up, it's a buy it now on eBay, there's no comps at all. To the average person, it may seem like a high price, but if you really are savvy and you know what you're doing, you look at it and you're like, nope, you don't even hesitate, you buy it and you just know it's worth more, like right away, right? So it's like you're not waiting for the player to get hot, you're not hoping, you're actually buying value. So
right.
I think there are opportunities like that for sure.
The Moss SP Authentic PSA 10, those are serial numbered to 2000, right? So that one came up on eBay and it was like 2,700 by it now, and I think the comps, it hadn't sold in a little while, but the comps were like 2,400. And I had just felt that, like, with the rise of the refractor prices, like, I had enough knowledge in the Randy Moss rookie market on PSA 10s to know that that was more, right? I figured it was probably more like 3,500 to 4,000 based on what other stuff was doing. So it's like I'm paying the all-time high at 2,700, but I hit the buy it now so fast because I know it's definitely worth more than that.
Yes, exactly.
All right, let's jump into the topic though. So the main thing I want to touch on is like how the market right now is pulling back, but I want to be more specific. It's pulling back in certain segments of the market. I think we're hearing a lot of people, especially new people, that are just kind of saying like everything's pulling back. What's sort of your take on the pullback right now? Is it due? Is it only happening to common cards? Like, what is your take on what's happening right now?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the rare stuff, you look at the really big cards, they're continuing to make all-time highs like every week, right? Like if you I don't know, if you get those PWCC emails and they let you know, you get that's always a warning sign to me too, by the way, but that's been happening for months, right? Where the subject line is setting new records, and that's what's happening. Any of the big cards, any of the rare cards are continuing to make new all-time highs. So I haven't seen any indication of any kind of pullback in that area, but for sure, you can see it happening with all of the other stuff, like the more mainstream base cards and stuff like that. And I have theories of what's going on, but what I'm really curious about is whether or not, so there's the whole, I think everybody that comes on your show probably pretty much brings up Gary Vee, but he's kind of been preaching hard on vintage, right? And you are seeing the vintage stuff go up a lot. And so what could be happening from my point of view is just money's just moving from one thing to the other. So to me, the hobby as a whole feels very healthy. It feels very strong. I would say it doesn't feel like it's pulling back. I can't say that for sure though, because I don't have the data, but I do closely watch a pretty good amount of different, segments of the market. And it doesn't feel like it's pulling back except for that really hot, like base card, and even beyond base cards, like Prism. Let's just call it Prism, right? And then I think it webs out from there. But a lot of the big, run up, like Anthony Davis Prism base card went up $3,000. You could just use that as an example because there was probably 10 other ones that did the exact same thing. And now I think they're below 2,000, maybe 1,500. That's a huge, huge pullback, right? So, I mean, technically you could consider that a crash. That's down, 50%. So I think it's just that people are starting to, I think like you said earlier, maybe it's a little different, but I feel like there's these cycles with collectors, and, and there's obviously a lot of people who are in it for the money, and there's these influencers. I see you posting stuff on Instagram warning people to stay away from the base cards, and there's just so much going on that it's hard for me to really tell what's actually going on, right?
Yeah. And when we were talking earlier, you came up with the term board money. What do you mean by board money?
Yeah, so I've been seeing people I personally know, this is happening to them, and yeah, I don't know why I call it that, but it makes sense to me because people get bored, right? And especially, and so there's this idea of like new money and board money. We need lots of new money to continue to come into the market if we want to continue to see the market grow. But we also need, the board money not to leave, right? So people get bored. I mean, it's just such an exciting thing in the first few months. And I'm sure you've encountered just tons and tons of like new people. And you see the difference. You can kind of tell the people that are really going to stick and the people that aren't. And my theory is there's not a huge, I don't know what the percentage is or whatever, but I feel like there's a lot of people that aren't going to stick around because they're getting bored. And I think the people that are, those hardcore collectors, a lot of your audience, a lot of the people that you kind of surround yourself with, there's always more of an emphasis on the collecting. But if you're in this for flipping or you're in this for the money, like it's going to get boring, right? And it's also going to get hard. That's the other thing. The last year, it's been, I mean, if you're not making money in this, like you, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't know what you're doing. I mean, you could buy literally anything. And that's where, to me, it feels very similar to cryptocurrencies, because I have experience in that market. And it was the same exact way. It's like, it didn't matter what you did. And even right now in the stock market too, right? You're seeing all these headlines of like record breaking stock accounts, and everybody thinks they're like a professional day trader now. And there's a lot, like how many people are doing that right now in cards, right? Because it's just so easy. If you can buy cards for $1,000 and a month later they're worth $3,000, right? Now we're starting to see the opposite happen though. So people are going to start to get bored and probably leave. And I think that's a good thing for the hobby, but it will be interesting. It'll definitely change things, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's why most of my platform is like practically begging people to like look at different cards and like try to find new realms, because I know they're going to get bored. I get tons of DMs, you know, all the time about like, should I buy this base card or this Prism PSA 10? And I'm just like, neither. I don't know. You should probably research more and figure out more rare things and keep looking. So you're right. Like, there's definitely board money. It's just a matter of like, do they find new stuff or do they not? I mean, you went through it yourself, right? You said yourself that you like got bored, and you either keep going because you're obsessed, and you think there's more opportunity, or you give up. So how do you not give up? What do we need to do?
Yeah, I think that you're doing the right thing. I mean, I think it's funny to me because it seems so obvious, but I guess to a lot of people it's not. And I do understand how you fall into these different traps, but even the whole like wide receiver thesis, like there's just some really cool cards out there. And people are like super into football and huge fans and everything, and they're staying away from wide receivers because somebody told them wide receivers don't have any value. Only collect quarterbacks, right? Like that's kind of been the thing everybody says forever, and people still say it. Stay away from running backs. They get injured too much. And, you know, like if we're talking about all-time greats, that's not even really relevant, right? So
yeah, I think that a lot of those discussions are obviously on these like these two paths where it's like, are you talking about legendary players, or are you talking about modern risky guys, right? Because like, you almost have to like put in that you almost have to talk about that up front, because it's like everything I'm saying in terms of pivoting into a new market, and you do this really well, is just like find the guys that have no risk as players, right? Like Randy Moss, Allen Iverson, these guys are retired. It's over. Like there's no risk.
Yeah. So the way I explain it to anybody who is trying to get into this and actually make a little bit of money, I always kind of break it down like this. It's like you're making a whole bunch of different bets when you buy a sports card. It starts with betting on sports cards as a whole. Like, okay, that's one bet. The next bet you're making is on a sport. Now you're betting on the actual sport. Then you're going to bet on the player. Then and so the list just kind of keeps going on and on and on. Of you could be betting on the card variation. So the less bets you're making, the better. And so if you don't need to find the next Tom Brady or the next LeBron James. You don't need to do that. Look at what's happened with LeBron James cards and Tom Brady cards in the last 2 years, right? So is that going to keep happening? I don't know, but the point is like, why risk it, right? So I get it. Like it's fun. And I think there's a place for that, to kind of like try to pick the new hot players. And I think that's totally fine, but you just know what you're doing, right? Know what you're doing, know the risks, and don't bring that, running backs are risky thing into the conversation, unless, like you said, we are talking about, and even then they're all risky. All players are risky. Kevin Durant just broke his leg last year, right? Like all of these guys, when they have to go on the court, and like I think Giannis is the most risky investment on the planet right now, because his cards are just so crazy. And I love Giannis. I don't have a single one of his cards though, because actually I do. I've got one, but like a National Treasures is like, it's like $200,000-300,000 for a good grade in National Treasures of Giannis, and he doesn't even have a championship. Like, what if, like, look at all the money that people lost in Andrew Luck, right? So yeah. I think you just got to know. It's just so easy to like get caught up, and you're just buying, and then next thing you know, you get hurt, right?
Yeah. So I like how you laid it out there, where like you've got these different, almost like check boxes of like things that remove your risk, like how far away from risk you are. And, you know, it's like picking someone who's retired is one way to do it. Picking a iconic brand is another way, where it's like, I at least know this brand will hold up. Another is like high grade. I at least know PSA 10. So like the Michael Thomas PSA 10 RPA you have is a good example of like, you picked one checkbox to not hit, which is that he's not already a Hall of Famer, right? Like he's risky because he's young, but you checked all the other boxes, and it was cheaper. It was football. Like you're sort of like balancing that act a little bit, and how much, and you're not going to spend 200 on Giannis, but you can spend, you know, 1,500 on Michael Thomas or somebody like that, right? Where it's like, it's not as risky because I'm just spending less.
Exactly. Right. And for me personally, like I have stuff that I'm doing that's risky, and that's okay too. If you want to do that, just know what you're doing, right? Know that you're risking, because the last year it feels like there's no such thing. And especially since we had this pandemic and all the sports paused and everything, it was like the greatest thing ever. You buy cards, your players aren't even playing, and they're going up, 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 right? So I feel like that gives people like this false sense of security as well. Like you buy Jason Tatum in the beginning of the pandemic, and by the time he ever even stepped on the court, his cards were up 8x.
Right. Another thing I want to talk to you about, that you and I are both on this side of things, is like, if you're buying sports cards, think about, and you want to invest in it, or you want to flip it or whatever, you have to think about who would buy this thing from you in the future, whether it's, you know, a month from now, 10 years from now. The people that are eventually going to buy it from you are collectors, right? People that just like want to have it, or just people that want to continue to flip. And I think not enough people are focusing on the fact that like collectors are the ones that have to hold this whole thing up, right? We're the ones, if no one's collecting this stuff, then it's all just like hot potato or passing stuff around for money reasons. Just talk about like how important the collector is to the hobby, and like how you can maybe focus on buying cards that would, you know, appeal to those people.
Yeah, I think the collectors are the ones that don't get bored, right? I mean, they're the ones that, and you know, something that I've seen you do, and I'm encouraging other people to do as well, is to not be afraid to just sell everything and start over and reset, and, you know, find new little pockets of passions within the hobby. And it kind of, I think, always re-energizes. As far as how the collectors are, in my opinion, you know, the cornerstone of the whole entire thing. Like even the debate on whether or not there's a place for base cards or not really still revolves around collectors, because the best argument I can see for there being a place for these base cards that everybody's talking about lately is that, hey, you know, not everybody's got thousands and thousands of dollars. Now, it's different when the base cards are also thousands and thousands of dollars. But if the base cards, you know, if the base card's $2,000, then how much is the rare? Like the rare cards are not probably something that are within reach for a lot of people, right? Now, you would probably say, well, go look at another player, go look at another area. And I would agree with that. But if you're just a hardcore fan of Anthony Davis and you want an Anthony Davis card in your collection and whatever, like there's probably a place for a base card, right? But again, that is a collector. That's who's driving that. Because if it's flipping, it's like somebody's going to be left holding the bag at the end of the day. And there always has to be a big time growth story, right? So, you know, if a player doesn't have enough time in his career left, I mean, there's just so many variables to that, right? So I think right now it's hard to tell which part of the hobby is being driven, or the market is being driven by collectors, and which part is being driven by like just that quick flip money kind of. And then you have like real serious investors in play right now, like VCs and like private equity. And, you know, you've got, I get DMs from people who want to buy like 10 Tom Brady SP Authentics at $50K a piece. Like it's crazy, right? Like you've got some serious big money coming in, who are thinking probably a lot longer term too, which I think is also really good for the space. But the collectors, I mean, again, it's the same. It's these cards, right? Like these are the ones that if you're a if you're a Drew Brees collector, you got to have this card. Like if you're a big time Drew Brees collector, that's the card, you know. And if you're an Iverson collector and you don't got this one, right? And the list goes on. So I think that's, you know, it's low pop, best condition you can get it in, although some collectors care less about that, of course. But yeah, I think it comes down to scarcity. It comes down to scarcity, and it comes down to players that we're going to remember in 20 years.
Yeah. Talk about how collectors don't sell cards. I think this is a fascinating topic. Like, I sell cards, obviously, like you just brought it up, like I consolidate, but it's only in like a very specific instance where like I'm going to buy something else. Just talk about how collectors, like the mindset of like, I don't want to sell something.
Yeah, they just don't sell. I think it's the same again, back to my 3 cards, right? In a perfect world, like I would just only have cards like that. And that's what my plan is. And then I will never sell. Right now I sell a lot because I have a whole bunch of stuff that's not in this category. So I'll continue to sell that stuff, and I'm buying now way less of that stuff and trying to only focus on this stuff. So I think the collectors, yeah, they don't sell. They just don't sell. They only buy, which is great for making the market go up, right? I don't know. I mean, why would you, if you really truly are collecting a card for the kind of pure sake of collecting, like why would you sell it? You really never would, unless you were, unless you were shifting your kind of approach to collecting, or obviously a lot of times people will upgrade, right? Or they'll just kind of move into something different, which I think is the fun part of the hobby.
Yeah, a lot of the new, like it's just prospecting, right? You're just like buying stock in a player. So like when the player goes up and he does well, you're just like, okay, now I sell and I made my money. Whereas some of these other cards that we're talking about now we want these cards because we physically want them. And that's why I feel like the sports card market has been undervalued for so long, and why it's going up right now is because people physically want these items, right? There's people out there that want to own them. They want to have them in their possession. And, you don't get that sort of feeling with stocks or crypto or these other things. So talk about like maybe the long-term stability of the hobby because of that one very specific thing, like the physical ownership of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That's my biggest argument. I have a really good friend who I got into the hobby recently, and he's like just a hardcore collector. He doesn't have any interest in doing this to make money or anything like that. But he also doesn't want to spend, a lot of money on a card and it goes down to zero, right? And so, he definitely looks at it as like an asset class, right? So he'll never sell, but he also wants to make sure it holds its value. And that's always been my biggest argument, is I'm like, well, look, like we have attachments to these things. Like there's no attachment to an Amazon stock. Like there's you literally buy it for investing, and that's it. So that physical, tangible, like attachment that collectors have to the cards, that's been hands down my number one argument for why I think it's one of the safest investments that you can make if you're buying the right stuff, because it's just not like, it only takes 2 people to want this card to hold its value, right?
Yeah. It's kind of like and I've heard Gary talk about this more recently, it's kind of like the high-end art market, right? Like we're sort of moving into that realm a little bit with these more rare cards that we're talking about. Is there any like similarities to like the high-end art market where people physically want to show their value, right? They want to be able to show off some piece of value they have in their home or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think similarly to art, there's always like a scarcity, kind of like elitism, kind of all these different things that totally come into play here. You can tell I'm proud of the 3 cards that I have here, and imagine when I have 25 of them, and like the process that it took to get there. It's hard. It's very hard. And even if you got the money, again, certain cards, not the case. If you got the money, and that's the stuff I'm not interested in. But I'm going to be, fast forwarding here in the next decade, and hopefully I'll have a display of, some of the rarest cards, coolest cards that you can get. And I want to put that on display. I think that's cool. I totally think it's like a form of art. And people do come into my office and look at cards that I have on my wall and ask me about them, and are actually like genuinely interested. People who have no real interest in sports cards. Wow, is that a jersey on there? That's an actual jersey, and is that an autograph? Is that they don't really know the ins and outs of any of it, so they're looking at this stuff and they think it's cool too. So there's absolutely that showcase component of it, which you can't just get overnight, right? Like you can't just have.
Nope. Yeah, you have a lot of these like end of the road cards where it's like, it's in the highest grade, it's the rarest one, it's your perfect player, and you're just like, even the way you held it, you're like super delicate about it, because you're like, this is the top of what it is. This is the top of the chain. It's like, you know what I mean? The end of the road. I can't go any higher. I'm not going to get any rare. I'm not going to get a better grade. And now I got to shift to something else because I'm done with this.
Exactly. Yep. And I like that. And that's what I like about that approach. It's so rewarding. Just one card. I know a lot of people, you know, are like player collectors, right? That's cool too, trying to get all the you know, cool cards of the player. I just want that one, just very best card of that player, and then, you know, I'll go be able to focus on something else.
Yeah. People assume that I have like 1 million LeBron cards. I think I have like 15 total LeBron cards. And I'm like a LeBron player collector.
Right.
I'm the same way, man. I would rather just like sell 15 LeBron cards and have one super awesome one. Let's talk about crypto a little bit, because I haven't really talked about it too much because I just don't know enough about the crypto parallels. Can you maybe just jump into that a little bit?
Yeah. So I kind of got involved with crypto in like the beginning of 2017. So for anyone who doesn't know anything about crypto, basically you've got Bitcoin and then you've got all these other different coins or tokens. And I was super attracted to just the whole thing. Blockchain makes so much sense to me. There was this kind of like concept of, you know, I have a business background, kind of a startup background. So there's this idea of like being able to start stuff without having to deal with like VCs and like all of the like traditional kind of, you know, barriers to raising money and stuff like that. And even as an investor, you know, you can't just go invest in Uber, right? Like it's not possible. Any of the hot startups, you can't just invest in them. You got to be like elite in order to invest in these things. So, you know, that's kind of the lens I was looking at it and getting involved with it from. And, you know, I got more and more into it. And as I got into it, I'm also very interested in trading in general, like stock trading and trading cryptos and stuff like that is something I dabbled in quite a bit. And, going through all of that was kind of my first major kind of like experience in a full market cycle. So I was kind of in trading Bitcoin at $1,500. Bitcoin went all the way up to almost $20,000. And then it went all the way back down to $3,000. And then now it's sitting up at like $10,000, $11,000. And I've kind of experienced that whole entire thing, got super involved with the whole cryptocurrency community, just saw it, right? And so there's a lot of overlap for sure in the card market. And you will even consistently see people bring up crypto, like they're coming from crypto into cards, which wasn't the case for me at all. They're kind of not connected at all. But a lot of people are speculating in cards the exact same way they're speculating in cryptocurrencies. And with cryptocurrencies, a lot of people got super, super hurt, right? So, and crypto is still a thing. Blockchain's still a thing. It's not talked about as much, but it's still a thing. And it's similar to where there's a lot of people who are like really hardcore advocates for it. They're not really in it for the money. And guess what? They're still there. They're still in it. They're still doing it. Mm-hmm. And all the other people who are just in it speculating got washed out, and now they're on to something else. So I think that, you know, with cards, I think that's going to happen. And now, just like you said earlier with, well, wait a minute, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about like the modern new players, or are we talking about all-time greats? Or, you know, again, I think that the rare cards are going to continue to make all-time highs forever. Honestly, I don't think they're ever going to really pull back, is my thesis. But I think we're going to see all kinds of like sub markets within that do all kinds of crazy stuff, is my guess.
So the person that's watching right now, I know there's a lot of people that are like, and I'm going to try to draw the parallel to crypto, but like they came in sort of, I don't want to say naive, but like they just didn't have the education. So they just sort of bought the first thing they saw, which in the crypto case is like, I'll just buy Bitcoin at 12,000 because I saw it on the news, right? Or I'm just going to buy Luca and Giannis Space Prism because that's what I heard about. And I just bought a bunch of it, and they've lost a lot of money right now. What would you say to that person? Would you say, do what you did and reset, or try to wait and see if you can catch another up? Like what's your advice to that person?
I would have to ask, the first thing I would ask them is, what's your goal, right? So if your goal is to make money, I would say, you know, I would really say, are you sure this is how you want to make money? Because it's not as easy as it looks. It's really hard. If it was as easy as I mean, it's been easy, but it's not sustainable. What's been happening in the last year is not sustainable. You're not going to just be able to buy the obvious, Prism cards and watch them go up 2x, 3x in the next 2 months. That's just, it can't be that easy. It's not going to be that easy. It can be for a period of time. Maybe it will be for the next 3 years. I don't know. But I would just challenge you to say, hey, is that really how you want to make your money? Now, if you're having fun and it's a hobby, even if you are doing it for the money, but that component, because I can relate to that, because I am an entrepreneur, a hustler. I've been doing, I think money is what attracted me to the card space when I was 10, right? So I used to play basketball for cards. Like I used to, like it. So there's that component to it for me, but it still is not about the money. It's fun. Flipping is fun. Like I do it for fun. I like to say, hey, that card is $3,000. Buy it now, right now. I know it's worth more. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. It's just a game. But if you're really doing it to pay bills, you got to really evaluate your strategy and probably be more of like a dealer or something, right? Versus trying to invest and speculate and trade and stuff like that. Now, if your goal is to collect and you just got burned, I would say don't give up. I would say, really challenge yourself to figure out what it is you want to collect, what it is. And it takes time. Like I explained my whole process and my whole, I lost money, made money. Like in the end, I'm doing pretty good, but I definitely lost a lot of money in the beginning because I probably didn't have to. Like when I sold all that stuff that I was telling you about, I had I had like Dwayne Wade Topps Chrome Refractor, PSA 10s. I had 3 of them and I sold them for like $800. Now they're selling for a lot more. So I just needed to get, and that's the thing. I asked myself, what is my goal? My goal wasn't to make money. I was okay to just take the loss and refocus because I wanted to collect stuff that I really enjoyed and that I felt really passionate about. And it's that simple. So what's your goal, right?
I think it also matters what you have, because like, the Wade Chrome Refractor, back then it might be easy to just say, I'll just, take my small loss and move on. And then now it's 5,000. I mean, it's way easier to just sit there and criticize that decision now because it went up so much. But it's a hard decision in the moment, right? Of like, is this thing rare enough? Do I think it'll go up? Is this thing too common? I should just get out now and I think it'll keep going down. You kind of need to assess that for yourself. Like, I wouldn't blame either scenario, honestly. Like I can understand why someone would want to hold. It just depends on how rare the thing is, right? Like if everyone's dumping something, it's really tempting to dump with them because there's just so much supply flooding the market right now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely recommend there's nothing wrong with just puking your cards, and getting out, because if you're uncomfortable with your position and you don't like it, just get out. That's definitely what I would recommend. At the same time, if you're not uncomfortable, I don't think that there's any way that these Prism base cards are just dead. I don't think they're going to zero right now. I think that they have a lot of runway because they still are the most popular. They still are, there's still going to continue to be new money coming in. There's still lots of buzz around them. So I don't think you should panic. And, if you're somebody over there that's sitting with a whole bunch of, again, you maybe bought the top of Anthony Davis or any of these other guys. I mean, you really think that, it's probably the low for Anthony Davis right now. I don't think he's going to keep going down. I don't know, but I would probably be patient and not panic sell, right? So there's like a fine line, right?
I mean, even someone like myself who doesn't really get into the Prism base, but like it's gone down so much so fast that I'm like, man, there's got to be some turnaround to go back up the other way a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And he'll get hot again and those cards will get hot again. And because again, if you do, there's not, especially in that year, there's a lot of them. I think there's over 1,000 of those ones. But the thing that I find interesting to think about too, is that I don't see a lot of people talk about is looking at not just the population of a single card, but looking at the population of the whole entire player. Right. And so that's like, to get a little bit outside of what we've been talking about, but like Mbappe is a really popular soccer card, and actually same exact thing. His silver or his Prism card so soccer's weird too, right? Because they have like these different rookie years.
Yeah,
technically has like 3 rookie years for each of his. I guess kind of like baseball with like you have your MLB rookie year and you have your whatever. But I'm actually big fan of the Mbappe play. I think it's risky for sure because he's young and everything like that. But what I like about Mbappe, and I'm using him just as an example, is that if you actually look at his whole portfolio of cards, there aren't very many. There's not a lot of options. Whereas if you look at like Mahomes, there's so many different Mahomes cards. And so that's something that I also have been thinking about a lot lately that I think is interesting for people to consider. Because if it's a year like 2012 for basketball, there's not a lot of cool Kawhi cards out there. There just really isn't, right? So, the Prism one, I'm not a huge Prism fan, but there's not a lot of cool stuff out there. So if you want Kawhi, and especially for a somewhat affordable price, I think there's a place for those cards. So yeah. I wouldn't rush to panic sell them.
Yeah, the market cap of a specific player is like so important, and I don't hear anyone talking about it on any of these channels. And it's like, I was arguing about it with someone today. They were like saying how they were comparing like Luka Prism cards to like Jordan and how the price wasn't. I'm like, dude, Luka has like 1 million freaking rookie cards. You have to think about, he's got like Blue Ice 99, Orange 60, White. He's got all these crazy parallels. They all, if you add them all up, there's more money in Luka Prism than Jordan 86 Fleer because that's his only rookie card. Yes. It's like, yes. You got to really think about the totality of the player and their total market cap. It's so important.
Yes, I 1,000% agree. Yeah, I'll never believe that there's that in the long run there's more demand than there is supply for those Luka Prism base cards.
Someone was selling like a Blue Ice for like, the Blue Ice and the White Sparkles are like $40,000, and it's like one of like 6 parallels numbered under 100. So every parallel numbered under 100 should be 40K and up. Dude, for 40 grand you can get Jordan like super grail type 90s insert stuff. Like, it seems nuts to me.
It is, and it's probably going to come full circle. So that's the other thing. I think people who are thinking like you are and who are patient are going to do very, very well. Whether you care about the money or not, I think you're going to do very, very well, because I think we're already even starting to see it, right? So,
and I think the era that you've chosen is very important for this discussion, because like, you're picking Hall of Fame guys, which is good, obviously, but like also those guys don't have a lot of cards. Like Drew Brees doesn't really have that many options. It's like you know of like the Topps Chrome Refractor, and those are super low pop. You've got the Contenders. There's just not that much out there, And same for Randy Moss. Like there's a few, and he's got some different random things, but like some of his autos are really bad, and like, you know what I mean? Like the farther you go back, the less choice you have, and the more current you go, you've just got so many dang options, and I don't think people are paying enough attention to that.
Yeah, and then you got to have the right, and then you can almost have like, if you look at like Brett Favre, I love Brett Favre, but his card, like he has no cards. Like his cards just suck, right? Like he's got the Stadium Club ones or whatever, and they're just not. I'm not very attracted to those cards. So you also have those years where they just didn't, like Barry Sanders, right? Like,
Sure,
yeah, he's got 2 rookie cards, but they're both super, super high pop, and they're not that cool, like. So that's the thing about the modern. Like I don't personally think vintage cards are that like cool. I think the modern cards are so much cooler. So I do think finding that's why I love Tom Brady cards, and I love Drew Brees cards and Aaron Rodgers cards. And then some of the, obviously I've never really played in LeBron, but again, that's what originally got me back in the hobby, ironically, and I don't own a single LeBron card. But I was attracted to those kind of cool, like RPAs, and they're just so cool. Those cards are so cool, compared to just like a piece of cardboard. And so I don't know. I mean, I think finding the perfect balance, and then also just being true to what you really, believe in.
Yeah, that era for me right now hits that perfect balance of like, that's new enough. Like Larry Fitzgerald for me is like the perfect guy to collect. He's got like the RPA, he's got the Topps Chrome Refractor in PSA 10 if you want that whole Prism vibe. He's got a Gold Refractor. He's got the Ultimate Auto. I know you have that one. That one's really cool, and it kind of hits on a different, but he doesn't really have much else. So it's like, I mean, he's got some other stuff obviously, but like he's a surefire Hall of Famer, so there's safety there. His stuff is very rare. It's hard to find, and it's cool looking. It's like a really nice balance. That era, Randy Moss, same kind of thing. Like those kind of guys, and basketball, that era, LeBron, obviously. I think that's just like a really important era of cards that it's kind of ignored because it's like too in the middle, right? Like it's not modern, so we're not hitting, and it's not super old where people are jumping on vintage bandwagons. Kind of like stuck in the middle, but I think it's like a really good balance.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that's the vast majority of what I have always had, because I also think like my first ever Instagram post when I decided to create an Instagram for cards was just literally putting up an Aaron Rodgers compared to a Mahomes. It was before Mahomes won the Super Bowl too. So I definitely would say Mahomes is a lot better off now than he was last year after winning that Super Bowl. Still really, I mean, I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but Mahomes is like, if something happens, you're screwed, right? Totally done. It's not
His
enough.
prices are like what?
He hasn't done
10x?
enough.
He's 10x
Right?
Aaron Rodgers right now, at least.
What's that?
His prices are 10x Aaron Rodgers right now.
Oh yeah, at least. And don't get me wrong, he's probably going to have a way better career than Aaron Rodgers and be considered better than Aaron Rodgers. But still, Aaron Rodgers already did it, right? I mean, he's only got one Super Bowl, but he's had a great career. He's a very, very, very good player. He's going to go down as a top 10 quarterback of all time. So I don't know. Mahomes is that's like the only young guy that I really am like, okay, I think he's the real deal for sure, but I don't know where do I'd almost, for me personally, I'd rather wait 15 years and buy his cards. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've actually have a really very interesting thought about what you're talking about right now, and I want people to think about it before they go ham on Mahomes. LeBron was in the same thing when he was young. People were buying the crap out of him. He was super expensive when he was young. And then you know what happened? He didn't win a ring for a while, and then he moved to the Heat, and everyone hated him, and he saw a huge, huge dip, and his prices went way, way down. That's the time you buy. And I tell people that all the time is like, if you really believe in a guy, don't buy him when everyone else believes in him and they're hyping on him. Wait a little bit and wait till a few people give up on him, or he doesn't hit the, he has like a down year or something, because it's going to come. Like Mahomes isn't going to win the Super Bowl every year. He's not going to throw 50 touchdowns every year. There's going to be some sort of dip, and that's when you buy, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Because, I mean, even, dude, when Russell Wilson came off the Super Bowl, I bet you that was like the most hyped he'll ever be. That's not the time to buy Russell Wilson. It's now like 4 years later when he hasn't won, the team's getting worse. And now he's starting to pick back up because people are realizing, like, no, he is really super consistent. He just doesn't have the team anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, he's super underrated in general.
He's cheaper than Kyler Murray, and he's like Kyler Murray's best case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah, that recency bias is unbelievable. So everybody just assumes, nobody considers the fact that there's a concept called, it's priced in, right? So a lot of this stuff that people think a player is going to do is already priced in, and they're like, oh, well, if his cards are this today, imagine what they're going to be in 5 years. Well, they're not considering that that's already priced in. They're not going to go anywhere because they're already so high. Like, look at what is Luka. Luka's amazing, but what's he going to have to do to maintain the prices of his cards over the course of the next 5 years? So I think exactly what you're saying. Exactly. And Giannis too, all these guys who still have a good amount of playing left, I think there'll be some great buying opportunities. But also, some of these guys are probably just going to fizzle out. I mean, there's so many examples of players who were just so good. Like, you can think about, if you really just think about, like, if you were watching when you were in that time frame, like, they were so good, but their card, nobody cares. Nobody's paying attention to them anymore, right? Because they're somewhere in the middle. They're not like going to make the top 50 list, right? Which I think lists are very important, by the way. I think that's like, because that's the thing that like kids are going to look at. That they're going to go to Google and they're going to search for this stuff, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, I can buy this and I can buy that. And but like, what about the guys that are just were amazing but don't make those lists? How many of those guys are we looking at right now, right? So I'm not talking about like they get hurt next year and they never come back. I'm talking they continue to have good career, but not good enough, because the bar is so high, right? There's just so few of these guys out there.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It makes me real nervous spending 40 grand on a pretty easy card to get. It just, man, makes me nervous. And I know a lot of people are screaming at me saying like, well, I've made so much money on Giannis and Luka over the last 2 years, but I mean, everyone's made money on all kinds of cards in the last 2 years. You can't think about it just in these short terms. You got to plot it out. What's going to happen over the next 5 years? What do you think is going to happen with these players? And, if you still believe, hold it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's scary too is the better you do, the bigger you go, right?
Yeah.
So you start to get some wins, and especially if you get some wins and you're not actually cashing in on your profits and you're just holding all these cards. On paper, it looks like you've got, $1 million in cards, but so you're like, oh, well, I just made 200,000 on this Mahomes card. Now I'm going to go buy, you're basically you're investing ahead of any cashing out, right? So now all of a sudden you've got this massive position in cards, and if we hit a couple, speed bumps, and we will, it's not gonna, no market just goes straight up, right? So what I think is going to happen is that we're going to obviously see some maybe some bear markets or something along the way. But I think again, those rare cards, you just won't see them. They just won't sell during that. Is kind of what I think will happen. Like it's not the time you're going to sell your rare card that you don't even really want to sell in the first place. But
totally,
these other ones will just go, I don't know. It is scary. I do hope people, aren't getting too hurt out there.
Last topic. We've hit on a lot of great stuff. I think it's been awesome. If you have something else, jump in. But just what about football cards? I mean, I know I've jumped into it recently, so I'm trying to be sensitive to the fact that I've bought a lot, so I don't want to pump it and hype it too much. But what do you think about just the fact that it's sort of the gap's been closing a little bit? Do you think that was because of influencers, or is it because the soccer movement where people just flooded money into it, or is it a real thing where football is just underpriced?
That's a good question. I think football is underpriced. I mean, basketball is definitely more popular. It's a global sport. I get a ton of, when I am selling stuff on eBay, a lot of people are hitting me up that aren't US based, basketball specifically. So it does make sense. I don't think the gap should completely close. Basketball should be more valuable than football, I think. Soccer, I think, is super undervalued just because, again, it's global. But then again, it's not as popular in the United States. So maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. Football, though, I don't know. Is football the most popular? It historically has been in the United States, but I don't know if that's still the case. And
yes, by a wide margin.
Yeah. So also it's my favorite sport. So that's, for me, I just love football. So it's hard for me to not buy football cards. And that's kind of what it is for me. Now, as far as where it's going to go, I don't know. Football is kind of more risky, but I still feel like all sports are risky. People get hurt in all sports, football more so, but I don't know. I don't really have a strong opinion about it, to be honest with you. I just love football. So I like the football cards. I think there's some really cool football cards out there. The reason though, I think is because of a lot of again, that recency bias is so huge. And also people are loving the speculation. People are loving to have, there's the gambling component that is always going to exist in this, which is that's a big Gary Vee kind of, point of one of his points of why he thinks sports cards are going to be so big in the next decade. And that's obvious. You can see it. People love buying those cards and watching the, it's like fantasy football, except for almost better, now all of a sudden I've got my fantasy football teams and then I also have my cards. It's I'm watching these games because I have the cards and I want to see this player do really well. And then especially you form these really strong opinions. This isn't football related though. I guess it's related to all sports, but for me, it's Aaron Rodgers. I don't get it. I don't get all the hate on Aaron Rodgers. And going into this year, I've been buying Aaron Rodgers cards nonstop, every single good one I could get since the beginning of last season. And it just never made sense to me looking at his cards compared to a lot of these younger guys. And now he has one good game and people are suddenly like, oh, Aaron Rodgers, it's just it's that recency bias. And so having those cards though, and being right about that, even for just one game is fun too. It's yeah, this is great. Right. Same as when you draft your guy in fantasy and you were right when he puts up 5 touchdowns and 500 yards. Right.
Yeah.
So in short, my answer, long, I guess, but summing it up now, I think that's a huge factor. Basketball's over, right? Now it's football. Yeah, and I think we'll see more of that as the hobby grows and more money. I think that people have always said, buy in the off season, sell in the season. I think that's going to be amplified. I think there's a little bit of like a fake out again with the pandemic and everything like that threw off the whole like normal cycles for sure, because people were just kind of buying everything. Like Mahomes obviously went crazy during the pandemic. And so, yeah, I think that's probably what's going on.
And the guys that we were buying from that era we're talking about, there's going to be guys from this current era that we're going to want to buy similarly in a few years. Like if Giannis doesn't win a championship, I'm going to then be like, Giannis is undervalued. Look how good he was. And you guys are forgetting how good he was. You've moved on to Luka and you've moved on. Like those guys are going to go through those cycles as well. I think, you know, like we'll sort of ride this wave of overvalued, undervalued until they retire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think my favorite hands down in football is Larry Fitzgerald. I mean, when people actually, because he's just not a flashy guy either. Like when people actually wake up to how good his career was, like it's insane how phenomenal of a career Larry Fitzgerald has had, and he's got everything, right? Like, so yeah, we're gonna see more of that. I think he just doesn't have any upside, right? In terms of actual playing,
right.
Doesn't mean cards don't have upside. That's like, why do you buy Jordan? You know.
Right.
So,
yeah, why do Mickey Mantle's prices keep going up? And Mickey Mantle, like if you rank him out, he wasn't even like ranked that high. His WAR isn't that high. He wasn't like one of the best players of all time, you know, top 10 or anything. But it's just, you know, that's just like the card sort of taken off. It's like the right era of the first card that came back, and it's like he was a popular guy because he was sort of flashy and all the 5-tool kind of guy. So it's like there's all these different factors, right, to what makes cards valuable.
Yeah.
All right, man. I don't have anything else. Got any final tips for anyone watching?
No, I don't think so. Just like I said, know your goal. I think that's the biggest thing. It's so easy to get sucked into, like, especially when you start following people on Twitter and Instagram, and there's so many conflicting point of views, and everybody's putting up their, you know, and actually I have another thing that I want to say too, because I think it's really easy to look at all these Instagram accounts and see all these crazy cards, which, by the way, if you go to my Instagram right now, I don't have half of the cards that are on my Instagram anymore, right? I should probably clean that up. But like most people don't have these crazy $1 million collections that it looks like they have. So if you're new coming to the hobby, you're trying to build a collection, I think it's really easy to get discouraged and be like, man, I'm never going to get anywhere. Like I can't afford any of this stuff. Well, most people aren't sitting on $1 million collections, right? Like most people have modest collections, and you know, some of the coolest people in the hobby, like they couldn't even tell you what their collection's worth, right? So you just got to stay true to yourself, and you got to definitely know what your goal is. Otherwise, you're just too much noise.
Yep, great advice. And it's also a marathon, dude. Like those guys that do have the $1 million collections have been doing it for years and years. And if you just started, you know, I'm sure those people would help you as well. You know, reach out to those kind of guys and be like, how did you get to this point? And most will tell you a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of losses, and a lot of sad days and good days. It's all good.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Thanks for your time, Corey. This has been good. Plug your Instagram real quick.
It's cards2c, the number
Cool.
2.
I'll post that on the video so everyone can hit it up. But go check out his collection. He's got a lot of cool stuff, and see if you can pry some of those big cards away from him.
All right. See you later, man.